Shall we start with the assemblage points?
Yeah, first of all, I would like very much to thank everybody involved here in the organization and the attendance. I've heard some amazing stories because I couldn't sleep half the night. I was so excited to get this organized and hear such wonderful people talk about very, very coherent and cohesive subjects like how to, practically to put things together with herbs, with thermography, with your own living environments, about water we heard about early in the night as well. And there's some amazing speakers coming up later in today.
Yes, there are.
And I want to thank each one of them, all of them, for their appearance, for their time and efforts. They all are very busy people, and they're putting their efforts to get this information out to everybody out there. So when you're tuning in later, please don't forget that there's already 8 hours of recording taking place that is freely available. Thank you for that. And you can get that free from now on after this show available. And the way let me, if you're okay with this, I'll just describe after this how we got involved into this with the Theragem, of course, with the fusion of light, pulse electromagnetic frequencies, color, white noise, human resonance, gold, metal, precious gems, minerals, crystals. Each one plays their own role in our lives, and this is fused together based on ancient wisdom of the Ayurveda, of the traditional Chinese medicine, Native Americans, Middle and South Americans, all over the world. Crystals have been used, gems have been used for healing throughout the ages, because they have innate abilities, characteristics that we have recognized and then have put to use. And we see this in the Tibetan and the Ayurvedic medicine, for example, where they're being used to ingest after a thorough grinding process. We see them in acupuncture on the early stages with the acupuncture needles with little gems on top of them. And combining that in our now present day technology, it helps to bring the body's own energy levels higher up, through which it then is naturally enforced, naturally and inspired almost to get well and to follow a path to natural healing by itself, by cascading actions that take place. And if you then combine that with other technologies, with other healing therapies and so on, you will see that people's well-being and wellness will be raised significantly, because then the missing links can be filled in. And one of these examples has been with Nabutle. So many other examples as well. The most important thing that I'm wanting to talk about here, because Theragem you can read up upon on our website, www.medicahealth.org, and on the different therapists and sales points in the world where information is shown. But most of all, one point that we can't really describe in written words is a process what we call the Assemblage Point Reconnection. And this brings me to your question. Thank you, Dawn. Is that when we developed the Theragem, one of the things that we saw with this was we encountered, amongst others, Dr. Angela Blaine, who's from the UK and has researched something called the Assemblage Point, which is a point in the electromagnetic grid of us human beings. And within that grid, just like the Earth has an electromagnetic grid surrounding it, there is a north and south pole through which the energy flows. we don't know much what this does, not naturally. This has not been taught into school. So let alone that we know that we have, as human beings, like any other human being soul, that we have an electromagnetic point that is focused and that is feeding and nurturing us with electromagnetic frequencies.
Yeah.
And when this is at the right position, correct position, which is roughly in the heart area on the breastbone, then it will feed and nurture and soothe your body with the right energy, the right electromagnetic energy. So it's a very scientific process that has been established in 2001 with an EAV voltmeter, with a Gauss meter, galvanometer, and amongst others, Dr. Kessler has shown that any other point in the immediate surrounding of the correctly positioned assemblage point has a Gauss meter reading of 500 Gauss more than any other close by relating point. Now, I'd like to stress with this as well that it's not a heart chakra. We're not talking about chakras here. We're not talking about meridian points from the traditional Chinese meridian system. This is an independent field with a focus point that is then feeding the body with the right kind of information through which you then can feel grounded. If it's optimized, you feel indeed grounded. People say often, oh, I feel my feet.
Yes.
Very surprised. Their immune system repairs and so on is really, really high. They take up the responsibility for health issues.
Okay. Which is something we've talked about at length this morning, about personal responsibility.
Yeah, indeed, personal responsibility will be raised when the assemblage point is at the correct position. We will also see that that person is able to repair himself quicker or herself quicker than before, which will then bring us to a higher healing ability. And in a way, you could see this as that you're developing a Teflon layer, so that outer influences don't affect us as much.
Okay.
What we see with people that have a disease or a debilitating degenerative condition is that they're often with their emotions, with their mental processes, that they're in a sort of loop, like the LP with the groove that you had when it was stuck, when you turned it around too many times. And what they have is they go back to this moment in time so often that it wears them emotionally so down. Tears will well up and so on. And what you do is to raise the energy, to raise their natural happy feeling vibrations. So serotonin and dopamine levels naturally are raised. And that means that they can address issues, and they can see and they can take distance from that what has been bringing them down such a long time. And some people have this naturally. Children, for example, they don't hang on to old issues. They are naturally inclined to really get on with things. Yes. It's only up until a certain age, as of a certain age, that they'll feel the significance of the impact of what happened in their lives and start to munch over it. Now I'm pointing at the left brain on this side. And this is exactly where it takes place, that whole process. It's an analytical feature that we're being taught into our schools and our educational systems to be analytical. And so it's inherent in our society that we stimulate even this behavior.
Yes.
That we then need to address as therapists, as medical specialists, with compassion, because that's the way out of here. So when we look at the position of the assemblage point, and we take into account that people go through daily affairs, they have their emotions and their the banging of the door. Did I hear that earlier?
Yes, you did. I pulled up your favourite.
Yeah. That's the small lessons we learn in life, but we want to master situations.
Yes.
So what happens when the assemblage point is in the correct position? It will feed and nurture and soothe the body on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a mental level, and a spiritual level, right? Now, if you have a physical trauma or an emotional trauma, like you bang your head or you bump into a car or you fall down the stairs, it can mean that your assemblage point moves from its correct position.
Yeah.
That can also happen through emotional pressure. It can also happen through social pressure. That you have to bring your homework in on time. You have to have that task ended by the end of the day. And that pressure can wear us down. And my favorite expression here is like the marbles that we used to have as kids. When we went to there was trendy times that we, in summertime, springtime, where the marbles came out and that we started marbling, make a little hole in the grass and started throwing the marbles, roll the marbles into the grass, to the hole. And the one that had the most marbles in the hole, they got them. But over time, and not too slow, it went quite quickly, we had then this line forming in the grass. And I like to compare this with the assemblage point. The assemblage point can move through that position because of the pressure that's being put on us. Remember, it is an electromagnetic grid that we're talking about. When you look at the Earth and you see what happens when pressure comes from the outer universe, even from our own sun, all the electromagnetic fields gather together to ward off against the solar flares, the harmful. So it all comes together, and that's what happens with us as well. And if that happens many times, what will then happen is our assemblage point will move out of the position. And that has been mapped out. And that map shows us that when someone is put under control or exerts a lot of control, the assemblage point will move to the right-hand side. And when then someone becomes stressed because of that control, and the control levels are high, then that will move a little bit up. And then the next phase is that they'll get into a panic state when the control and the stress levels are not high enough, and so on. So you get that repetitive motion, and this is what we see in our society. Apart from all the other things that surround us, like the geomagnetic influences, the UMTS masks, the GMS masks, the Wi-Fi's, and so on. Apart from that, that's resting and pressing on our all ecological system. We also have to do with the social pressure that we put upon us, and that is causing these altogether the issues that we're facing with today. A multitude of conditions that people gather and present themselves to their doctors, GPs, and so on, and nobody knows the real way out in that respect. So that's why we put a lot of attention to the assemblage point, because we know it's part of that missing link. When we raise the mental levels, the happiness levels, serotonin, dopamine levels, what will then happen is you will have the energy and you feel safe to resolve the issues that you're confronted with. When that happens, then you can move on to the next step. And this is where what I see the best results stemming from, that if someone has a condition, it's not so much only the resolution or the resolving or dissolving of the physical problems or the emotional problems or the mental issues, but it's also the connection with your own spiritual awareness. When we started with the Theragem, I'll just pop back in time again. Okay. When we started with the Theragem development, And the then managing director, when he came on board, he said, this reminds me of my Huna training. And the Huna training that he had received on Hawaii, where he flew to every so often in a year, he called upon the light to restore the balance on an energetic level. And he set up this, he said, I can see this happening with the Theragem as well. When we put it into a certain position, we can address the assemblage point to the correct position, but at the same time, we also restore the connection with the higher self. And in very short terms, we are a conscious mind, an ego. I'm a managing director, you're an office manager or an interviewer at this moment in time. We do our things. Mandy is a therapist. We all determine these particular wordings to each other. And that feeds our ego, and we need it. It's a conscious thing. It's a becoming aware of it. And our conscious mind can only process 7 bits of information per second. Now I'm quiet for a second and start to think about what I can process, right? Consciously. And then we have something which is called the other than conscious mind, which is everything that I'm not aware of in that instant second, and it can process up to 1 million bits of information per second. Don't ask me how they know this. It's all based on research. And what then happens, what then is part of us, is a part which is called the higher self. That higher self is that little voice that tells you, you should be doing this because this is really good. And you know in your heart that it's true. But somewhere along the line, you've been told too many times, that that was the wrong thing to do. And then at one point, that little higher self on your shoulder says, hey, I'm here. You're not listening to me. And you're thinking, yeah, I can hear you, but, someone else is telling me that. It's not working. And the higher self says, you know what? I'm going to the pub at the end of the corner where the other higher selves are sitting, and we'll drink a pint. And you can call us whenever you're ready. And this is what we then developed, to call the higher self back. And in this process where we use the Theragem to put people in the light, where they are just very comfortably seated, they can then access the totality of themselves and allow their emotions and their stuck and grind out patterns to be highlighted by themselves, by their own volition, or what is presented to them, and then actually dissolve them. Let them go up in the light if you wish. And when that happens, afterwards you see people making changes on a level where they go back to the phase of doing what is good for them, taking a step back from life, maybe, or taking that other job that is bringing them much more quality of life. There's so many examples that are running at this moment through my head that we do in the trainings, that I do individually, where we see these changes happen. And not so much maybe instantaneously, although that can happen as well. The other day we had a young woman here with a beautiful Assemblage Point Reconnection shift. And she said, I felt it flittering in my heart, like here. She pointed at the thyroid, and she said, I only feel that when I'm in love. And with my present partner, when he sends me a text, which was so sweet. And she said, I feel so bright. I feel so elated. And she said, things are running now normally.
Yes.
Normally, as in she was at ease, the outer world's opinions, the outer world's pressures did not so much matter to her anymore. Right. And what did matter to her was how she felt, that she was giving the right vibes out, and using the right wordings, and feel just generally so at ease with herself. Yeah. And it's not the only one. No. It happens with 99.9% of the people that do this therapy. And for me, as a person, as a managing director of this company, that is one of the most profound changes that we can make in someone's life out of their own volition, that they make that step and that they can say, okay, I'm doing now what's right for me. And in that, make that change. And then you see the changes taking place, because the body is an incredible tool, and it can create this beautiful cascading responses that we're not aware of in our minds, but can do. It's running a program of over trillions and trillions and trillions of vibration of cells that we're not too aware of at this moment in time. Oh, that's right. And when we start to realize just a small impact even, that we have the ability to control this, then miracles can happen. They can come out. So, yeah.
I know that the person you're talking about felt so strongly that she spoke to me about it afterwards at some considerable time, and just said for the first time in a long time she felt like she knew who she was. She felt that she felt in the right environment, and she said she was so moved by the connections that she was making since her involvement with Theragem and this organisation, that she was grateful that she'd come upon this organisation, because she was finding that she was making the right connections outside of herself that were important to her and helping her feel as an individual that she was on the right path. So I particularly was moved by the things she said when she came out of that. So that's exactly right. I know I've been fortunate enough to sit in and experience some of these things. And you're quite right. I think even for those people who are fortunate enough to sit in, there's a sense and there's a feeling and there's almost a cleansing, if you will, of yourself, even if you're not the person who's having their assemblage point reconnected, that you're given that time to consider, to think, and really to close down the conscious mind almost, and allow your thoughts and allow the subconscious mind to infiltrate and sort of take over for a little bit, and reconnect yourself in that sense with, this is a beautiful thing. And regardless of what society's pressures say, regardless of what people outside there say, that this is a good thing. This, people who don't understand it may have negative things to say, or fear, that they present you with fear because they're not sure, they themselves don't understand it, or are cautious about getting involved. And that can be reciprocated, that can sort of be echoed by those people. But I think when you're sitting in the environment and you feel, no, this is right, this feeling that I'm experiencing is good, and therefore this has to be a good thing. And I'm going to take you back, Catharina, to some further examples. We've talked about the assemblage point certainly in the last couple of weeks over a great deal of time, because you've been talking about using the chakras, using crystals. And I'm going to ask you to kind of expand on your experiences somewhat and share that with people.
On the assemblage point?
Yes, on the assemblage point. If you could expand on that so that...
Okay. That's a very good... I'd love to do that. I just want to bring back a little memory from earlier last night. I heard one of the Australian speakers. Okay. He was talking about water. Right. And that water contains crystals. Yes. and that these crystals are what we need to become healthy. So immediately my mind just jumped off on a really circle of thoughts and ideas and creations and so on. But one of the important things what we see is that, or what was brought forward by Dr. Carl Moret, who is one of the leading water experts. He said it's no wonder that the body responds to Theragem, because each drop of liquid in our body contains crystals.
Yes.
And these crystals respond to the information that is given through the fusion of this. There's so many experiences done with the Assemblage Point Reconnection. I've been a trainer for the Assemblage Point Association for a long time. I have done it in several, there are several ways to reconnect the assemblage point to the correct position. They're not always the most non-invasive ones. And I was looking at the time for a more non-invasive way. And when I encountered the Theragem and started to work with that, whoa, what a difference that made. Even to the point that I treated people with the previous method, which incorporated a blow between the shoulder blades, to the point that we did the assemblage point, you're sitting in a chair, that person sitting in the chair said, I know now finally what you mean by this, or what happened. And that had a long time impact. We do during the trainings often assemblage point reconnections, and it's always amazes me because the room is in a silence. The people that are sitting there are watching in awe with respect to the one sitting in the light, where this whole process is highlighted. And we all have our innate talents. And during this whole process, people discover some of their talents, or when they are already aware of it, they'll speak up and they feel confident about it. They'll speak up and they'll tell you what they've seen. Some people even get messages and tell them to the person who afterwards. Other people are strongly kinesthetic and feel what kind of feelings happen with that other person, and that they feel that clouds are lifting them of depression. Some people see like almost like angelic beings. These can be tricks of the eyes, but at the same time, it corresponds with a general feel in the audience. Some people even smell. They smell.
Sorry.
I think we need to mute Mandy.
Look, mute Mandy, there you go. Mute Mandy. There you go. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Some people get messages through and tell that to other people, and sometimes it just takes place after the event. There was one young lady who drove home, and she found it was really, she saw suddenly, and she reminded herself, jeepers, I saw that when I was a kid and I closed it off. She saw lost souls, ghosts, and she felt a bit uncomfortable about it. But at the same time, she said, that was my life's purpose. I remember now. And she was really like, whoa, I didn't know this was so powerful. Another person, and it sounds very out there, and it's not the purpose of this conversation.
No.
But it is that you're wakened up to what is available for you and what you are here to do for yourself and to help other people to become, more human, to realize that life as we know it at this moment in time, it's not about fear. It's not about greed. It's not about anything that we're being presented with. It's about that you have a conscious choice that you can then put compassion in your life, in your work, and that you're there for the people that you love to help them to restore a balance inside them and to have a life of contentment. And what we're constantly being presented with is that we should not be content.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Whatever level we're living up. But that we think that we're islands in the sea, but we're not. Even with just a thought, even with just a touch, very nicely, yeah, that all makes us feel wanted and that we're being there for each other. Ultimately, that is what we're here to do. At least that's my vision for me. And when you talk on that from that level, with your heart opened, that's when the changes are taking place. I want to add to that because the recent research on heart frequencies, the recent research by Greg Braden and Dieter Breurs and many others in the field that has shown that we have, and at HeartMath's Institute as well, that we have a fifth chamber of the heart, that we do have living brain cells in our heart. And it's my belief, I should say, because it's a theory, I haven't been able to investigate this, but I believe that when we have the assemblage point at the correct position, there will be compassion activated. Those brain cells, heart brain cells, those, what's it called? Those, the fifth chamber, it will be activated. And through that connection with the heart, we are then becoming a more heart-centered human being. And I think that's the biggest achievement that we can get to. And you start to live in the here and now, and not in the past, and not in the future, but here and now, and you take the steps that you can do now, not in the future or anywhere else.
And enjoying life as it is at the moment, acknowledging the experiences that you're having. I think there's an expression, isn't it, stopping to sniff the flowers. I think that's really important, that we do live in the here and now, that we do experience things as they happen and take on board them fully so that we're aware of what's happening, so that we can best act to our true selves. I think you've said that already. In terms of the assemblage point, for me, the testimony that I've heard, the things that I've witnessed, it is really about recognising that we are subject to a lot of influences. You started off by talking about that there are influences, particularly in the modern world, because we are bombarded in our homes. While we're walking down the street, we pick up a newspaper. Any form of communication is now being manipulated and by marketing companies, media. And so the messages that we're receiving, I think, are designed to make us feel unhappy with our lot, that we should be striving for more. I think you're absolutely right. We're always, people are trying to sell products, therefore we must have this, so we're not a whole person without this. And I think to take a step back and to analyse what's really happening and to look and think about, as you've said, the here and now, I think the assemblage point really works on that level. Certainly from the conversation we were having earlier about the young lady we were talking about, just to sort of see her come out from the assemblage point and to just watch her body language. She was very, very different in the way she moved. She was taking things on board. You could see from her facial expressions, from her eye movements, that she was analysing things, that she was thinking about. And that's really important, because certainly speaking to that person previously, she didn't feel that she had the time to do that. She was being pulled all over the place. She was very busy with work. She was very busy with her children, with her husband, with her life. Other people are sort of getting involved and asking her, calling upon things to do that. So it was beautiful to watch that. The fact that she was able to come out and just not be influenced by everything around her, but rather take that time to have some inward reflection and think about.
No, exactly. And that's what Dr. Balin talked about earlier. and some of the others as well. And I can really recommend that you listen to these in the recordings, because it's about indeed making the shift from that sympathetic fight or flight state to a parasympathetic state where you can then let go. And that's where Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, all these beautiful forms where we have a little bit of time for ourselves, to have that quality time if you wish, but just a dedicated time where life stands still, where there's no mobile phone ringing, where you have a bit of fresh air. All these simple things, we're being pushed out as we go along. But even just as simple as breathing can bring us back into a more optimized homeostasis, more optimized balance. Talking about breathing, that's the only speaker that I haven't heard yet, that we haven't got someone on breathing. On air, because it's about air, it's about oxygen and oxygenating our bodies. That gives us that quality through which toxins can leave, through which our bloodstream can optimize itself, through which our thinking gets clearer, our ideas can flow, and we won't feel burdened. And there's simple exercises for that. There's another thing that I can warm-heartedly recommend for anybody wishing to improve their lives. It's a very simple, a very straightforward way, which we're going to offer as a gift to the show, that you can, and we're hoping very much so for donations for the rest of Nabula's treatments and sessions that she still needs, that everybody is wanting to donate. What we offer in this recording, the specialized recording, is a forgiveness session based upon the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono, where the light is being used as a bridge to resolve and dissolve unforgiven parts of you, unresolved negative emotions. And this is a recording of less than half an hour. We've had some major experiences. Again, I've had some people testing it for me, and just based on that recording, that they were able to bring back faces of people that they've forgotten, even though they've seen them a week before, but couldn't bring them up because of the violation of their emotions, and the that was clouding their memory. Through that, they could then breathe in and breathe out and let go of what held them back, or what would have become, that could have become an issue because it had such a strong emotional impact on them. And this ties in then again with the assemblage point, where we bring the light, the fusion of light, the pulsed electromagnetic frequencies, the precious gems, crystals, the color therapy, and the white noise and Schumann resonance and the impression metal all together. And then you start to breathe. Then you get a breathing exercise. And that breathing exercise just makes sure that you get a powerful breath in, but the out breath is quite long as possible, comfortably possible. And then you make room for these shifts to happen, because you're no longer in that fight or flight stage. So you're easing down, and your whole energy levels, vibrations are higher up. And then it's much easier to let things come up and let go of them. And I think that if we are only able to teach ourselves, we're going to make a difference to our children and our children's children. It should actually be a part of our educational system. It shouldn't be a religion, an ism. It should be part of day-to-day life, that we learn to recognize situations where emotions and physical situations have been affecting us to a deep core level, and that we then recognize them and let go of them. Just because we don't need to walk around with the pain, we need to walk around with the lesson. We need to master that lesson and then letting go of it, because it is no longer part of our world. It's part of, then it becomes part of you as an enrichment of your character, an enrichment of your personality. And then you become that charismatic person. And then it doesn't matter who or what you do in life, but it's about that.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think to some extent schools are ideal places to help young people deal with confrontations. We have a lot of sort of, particularly in younger years, where children are coming together and they're finding out who's, you know, top dog in the school, and there's a lot of confrontations, a lot of life happens then. And for children, it's really important that they learn how to manage that, how to cope with that, and how to deal with that, so they can move on, so that they don't become people who have long memories of miserable school days and things that happened. That if they can put those things into perspective, that they can learn to manage those things, they can go on to be stronger adults and deal with situations better. Catharina will tell you, I often say that you can often see a person's inner child, or you recognize the story from the way that they deal with confrontation and they deal with situations, because they haven't yet learned to master how they're going to manage that in a way that's healthy for themselves. So people carry around a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of pain, and they feel almost targeted by the world, that things happen to them because it's building on top of each other, rather than having let it go, recognize that it's an incident that happened, or it's a situation that happened, and feeling very good and positive about the way that you've managed it and the way that you've moved forward. So I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a scope within education to learn how to deal with those situations for the well-being of children. I think that's really important.
Yeah, we see that in Holland. In the Netherlands, we see that children, that there's an educational system that's quite free. Like here in the UK, there's an educational system, there's a state or private school, and then parents can take their kids and do homeschooling. So that doesn't create a lot of diversity in the schooling systems. But what you see in Holland and in Germany as well, that there are schools coming up now where NLP is being taught, where there are different thought patterns like transcendental meditation, a lot of independent learning educational systems, where kids are being taught to learn from within.
Yes.
I'm not judging it, I'm just saying it's a possibility, and it will open up creative expression and creative freedom. It was only in 1905, like this as well, that Walter Lippmann, who was a famous American journalist, he said about the educational system, he wrote, when everybody thinks alike, nobody thinks much at all. So not a lot of chance for a creative world, and we can see that as well. There's not been a lot of creation, and the creations that have been developed or have had a chance to develop have been put the lid on, because as much as possible, because of the almost like capitalism, but taken over. And the more we see that on a day-to-day level, but we need to stimulate that inner creativity, and not just with us, but with others in our nearest surroundings as well. And allow for, that will allow ultimately for the changes to take place to a positive world, where hopefully our children's children, or children and children's children, will be able to choose, or that there's a system where we can combine and take an integrative health solutions.
I think you're right. I think certainly in terms of education, we have to think about how many children feel that school doesn't necessarily work for them. I think and I don't want to harp on this too much, but I think there's scope for helping people to deal with stress, particularly if you think that our educational systems, certainly in the UK and around the world, the league tables, you can see why the education system is going towards a very competitive way of thinking, because it is capitalism. It is, we want to be the best, we want to achieve, we want to have that highest economic output. And I think from my experiences working in childcare, that system of creating an environment in which we're all striving towards the same goal doesn't necessarily work, because we're not all banging the same drum, are we? We're all, and I think it's really important that children feel that they can be celebrated for their own achievements.
Indeed, and what I wanted to say to that as well is, you see in all the non-invasive traditional medicine, like the Ayurveda, like the traditional Chinese medicine, the children up until, and homeopathy as well, the children up until a certain age of 7 for girls, 8 for boys, years of age, that they are able to be themselves, although it's being shortened as we speak in the last couple of years due to all the social media and television and so on. But what you see is that when up until that age, children are quite, if it's not too debilitating the condition, that we can treat them quite easily. After that, it becomes a secondary phase, and that's becoming more difficult. But it links in what we see on the assemblage point, and the conscious mind, the other than conscious mind, and the connection with the higher self. That 7 to 8 years, 9 years, that's the time when you've been told often enough by your mom not to slam that door and get a smack around or sorry, not smacking, but been told off or other things. And then you then think, okay, it's not the perfect example I'm giving here, but at the same time, it shows that that's the turnaround point where kids start to work with their own minds, with their own egos, and that they then no longer allowing themselves to listen to their higher self, and no longer to listen to those other than conscious signals that are being given, because they're being pushed into a different direction. And when we see then as well that the assemblage point starts shifting, and especially when that starts to they need to have that shift, that shifting phase as well, so that they get life's experiences and master them. And then when they get into 18, 19, 20, when they get to a grown-up phase, that they then, if they have learned how to not to just be relative about issues, but also to learn that there's a forgiveness process that they can do for themselves, that they breathe properly, then you can send them anywhere and they'll be able to stand up for themselves, because they'll listen to their inner calling.
And I think as well have the confidence to go anywhere and do what they want to do, and in a sense that they perhaps don't necessarily know, because we were talking about parenting yesterday, and I won't come on to that, it's a long subject, isn't it? But I think it's really important to empower young people so that they feel that they themselves have some level of responsibility and can take control of what they're doing. I've just noticed that Amy has joined us. Hi Amy, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hi.
How are you two?
We're good, thank you.
Good. Thank you very much.
How are you?
Very good. I'm in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Oh, fabulous.
Which is wonderful. I'm here for Christmas. I'm super excited about that. I've just been listening into your interview as well. Sounds fascinating.
You're in the most romantic city.
Yes, I am indeed. Yep.
Yeah, we're waiting for Risa to come on board, I think. Do you have any questions for me, Amy?
I don't think so at the moment. I've just been absorbing everything you've been talking about. And I think like you were just talking about kids and how important it is for them to feel free and to be themselves for as long as possible. And then obviously with the impact of social media lately, I mean, I don't have kids yet myself, but you see it left, right and center, the impact that it has on children.
Yeah.
And I know that a couple of schools local to where I live in England, they've started sort of a whole new program aimed at kids and meditation in schools and that sort of thing to help kids just distance themselves a bit from the whole impact of social media, to ground them again and bring them back into themselves rather than always looking externally for validation, etc.
I think that it's good to hear that happening. I wasn't so much aware of that here in the UK, and in other countries it might be just very different. And we'd love to hear that feedback via email and so on. But what I have to stress one thing: it's not so much the educational system, the educationalists, the ones that are bringing it. They're living in that same environment, so we have to approach that step by step. And it's really good to hear this because they see those effects very much so on the children. The discontinuous. How they respond to their peers and no longer being able to recognize social expressions just because they're all the time on their social media. I find it hard to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And it's hard. You know, one of the things I teach on the Assemblage Point program is that when someone walks into my room and they are like this, then I know for sure their assemblage point is not at the right position. You know, I don't even need to know that it's where it is, to a degree, of course, but I know that I need to bring it back because it's absolutely not in the right position. There comes a lot more to it.
Of course.
But at the same time, to be able to recognize, to be able to communicate in this way with each other, that's, I think, one of the things that comes out at the moment is that we all need to reach out to each other and just, not with money, not just with donations, not with, but with that touch.
Yes.
And this is a beautiful point in time on the solstice that we make that happen, because time just stands still on these days. There's an equilibrium for a couple of days through which then, and this ties in then again with the assemblage point and the electromagnetic field, because now the shift of the Earth axis needs to take place. So if we don't come to a stillstand, it is a reflection of what's happening with the Earth as well. If that comes to a stillstand, we need to come to a stillstand. So Christmas, in a way, comes at the right moment.
Yes.
Certainly does.